From Franklin getting kidnapped by a Mexican gang to Andre Wright's nightclub getting bombed, here are some of Snowfall's most intense moments, starting with the shootout at the park. Now this one has to be one of the most intense scenes in the history of the show. In the 5th episode of Season 5, we see that Franklin's family and business are attacked by some unknown people. In this scene, Franklin and his crew are forced into a very intense and violent shootout as they're going somewhere in their car. The shootout is scary as hell and ends up hurting a lot of people, including Franklin's weapons supplier. Everyone else, including his mother, uncle, and the mother of his child, barely make it out alive. But this doesn't happen once, it happens twice in the same episode. The second time it happens, though, is more dramatic than the first one, because it happens in a location where there are tons of people around too. Then, after all of this is over, Franklin, along with everyone else who was there, sit down and wonder who could be behind all this, and why would someone go to such lengths to harm them? One thing that this whole shootout proves to them is that someone is after them, and they're going to come for their necks through any means they can. Something that fans appreciated about the scene a lot was how well it represented the actual drive-by shootings that were common back in the 1980s. Another thing that fans loved this scene for was how well it was shot, and how well it was performed by the actors. Just like another scene fans couldn't get over, Franklin's kidnapping. Okay, this has to be one of those scenes from the show that had all of us on our toes. No one knew what was going to happen next, or if Franklin was even going to make it out alive. And that's exactly why fans are obsessed with this scene. A Mexican gang who has been targeting Franklin finally gets their hands on him and Oso. But soon after, the two somehow manage to run away from them. This doesn't mean that they're safe, though, because while they're on the run, the gang members catch up to them and trap them in a hair salon. Here, they do their best to get the information about the money Franklin and Oso were carrying with them. The gang beats the two up and tortures them, but they have no success getting the information out of them. Then Oso tries to get out of the situation by appealing to the gang leader's Mexican heritage and telling them how they're almost related. But this doesn't work out for them either, and they remain kidnapped. The gang sees them and makes them a target after they see Franklin and Oso making their way through town with duffel bags. Now, if the huge duffel bags didn't make them a target, sadly, Franklin's dark skin sure did. The show did a really good job of highlighting the kind of treatment black people got back in the day. I mean, he's almost killed by the gang for being a black guy in the neighborhood. But this suspense-filled kidnapping wasn't the only thing the show got right. There's also the bombing at the nightclub. Season 3 of Snowfall came with a lot of pretty intense moments, and each one of these was done so flawlessly. But this one scene was definitely miles ahead of all others. The scene where Andre's nightclub is bombed. This was where fans had to jump from their couch and think about what was next. Andre Wright, played by Marcus Henderson, plays the role of one of Franklin's associates in the show. So fans just know that Andre is collateral damage, and whoever bombed the place wanted to target Franklin. The bombing leads to a lot of deaths and causes a lot of new issues for Franklin and his crew. This happens in the 9th episode of the season, titled Blackout, which honestly is a very fitting title for the episode. Not only is the nightclub bombed in the episode, but we also get to see the horrific aftermath of the whole thing, where the whole community is sent into a frenzy of violence and chaos. This scene is a big turning point in the show, and the storyline in the following episodes is heavily impacted by this one incident. The bombing caused a lot of issues, but the most exciting was the power struggles it caused between Franklin and his enemies. But if you think this scene was intense, wait till I tell you about this next one. The raid on Teddy's Operation Season 3 was something else when it comes to thrill, but the season that came after it also had some scenes that had us biting our nails, like the time when Teddy's drug trafficking operation gets raided on. Teddy McDonald, played by the incredibly talented Carter Hudson, is a DEA agent in the show, and his role is pretty important for the story, especially in this season. In episode 6 of the season, titled Say a Little Prayer, we see him getting targeted in a raid. In the episode, we see that the LPDA and the DEA decide to launch a raid on Teddy's warehouse where his operation is based. The raid is just the tip of the iceberg as the authorities try to end drug trafficking in the city, because this raid ends up causing so much chaos in the show. The raid leads to a bunch of pretty thrilling events, including one of the most notable ones where Teddy has a pretty upfront confrontation with the raiding officers. This scene set the narrative for the rest of the season and played a huge role in developing the storyline for the show. Fans love it because of just how scary and real it all felt. The raid ends up putting more pressure on Teddy than ever before and creates new problems for him as he tries to figure out how he's going to continue running his drug empire. Now, with that terrific raid out of the way, there's another unforgettable moment fans absolutely loved. The time Alton went after Reed and the CIA. In this scene, Alton finally gets to meet with Reed at a location they both decide on, but not to make up. No, that would ruin the show. They're about to have an epic square-off with guns and walk away with one of them dead right there. Alton keeps insisting that the whole drug game has always been Reed's fault, and that he's not exactly innocent in all this, but he is not the one to blame either. Reed, on the other hand, denies all this but doesn't blame Alton either. Reed says that this whole issue was because of Franklin, because it was his idea to start selling drugs in the first place, and that if it wasn't for him, no one would have been in this situation at all. While the two are arguing about whose fault it is, we see Franklin pull up with Sissy, his mom, and both try to make peace between the two armed men. But that doesn't go as planned, and Franklin eventually pulls out his gun too, only for Sissy to step in and calm everyone down. After she makes Reed believe that she and Alton plan on running away to Cuba and never talking about the drug business ever again, Reed decides to let them go. This whole scene had the audience nervous sweating because the tension during the standoff was so frickin' high.
All right, Sissy. I'll go.
Speaking of intense standoffs, how can I forget Franklin and Avi's standoff? When Avi asks Franklin in the start of the show to do something to prove himself to Avi, the Israeli drug lord gives him a bulletproof vest as he stands on a bridge inside the home and aims at him, telling him that if he's far, it would be easy for him to miss the vest and kill Franklin, but if he's too close, it'll hurt when he shoots. Franklin decides to step closer after Avi welcomes him to the real world. Franklin tells him to not miss the shot, and Avi shoots. The suspense and emotion in this scene is something fans still haven't forgotten. The drama, the lack of trust on one another, but still having to make a choice, and of course the killer performances. Everything was perfect. And that was all about some of Snowfall's most intense moments.